How do I get my needs met?
All right. Before we answer that question, let's do a review. So we got an awesome review over on iTunes, and it says, I have been listening to it for a month now. It's been so helpful in validating my thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and my spouse. Oh, and my spouses. It has opened my eyes to the reality that there is real hope to heal and to fix our marriage. I'm thankful for the vulnerability of making their marriage. And I'm thankful for the vulnerability that Ashlynn and Coby have, and its problems, public to give guidance. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to read through this. And hope to all of us out there dealing with similar situations. Thanks, guys. So thank you for that review. Appreciate it. I hope that it continues to be helpful for you. So just a reminder, you guys, we're still recording remotely. So Ashlynn and Coby are not with me right now. And that's why our audio isn't as good as it normally is. So hopefully one day soon we'll have great audio again.
Yes, we did order some stuff. It's just not here yet.
Yeah. Okay, so how do I get my needs met? And what we're talking about is in a relationship, right? How to get your needs met from your partner or in a relationship. Do we have needs in a relationship?
This is tricky, right? Because I will say that when I was acting out in addiction, I really felt like I had some very specific needs, and certainly as it related to sex. I'll just throw out a couple just to like set the groundwork, if you will. One of them was like, I wanted to have sex, and I wanted to have sex like on the daily or multiple times a day. I really felt like that was like a need, just like air and water and food and sleep. But I would have prioritized it back then as like sex was the most important thing. That was my greatest need. And then I've had needs in recovery as well that have changed and are different, and that have not been based upon, shame or addiction. So it's been an interesting like journey of getting my needs met. But the truth is a lot of times I didn't even know that I had needs.
Okay. So you're bringing up sex. I think I'm glad you bring that up, Coby, because I think that's an obvious one, right?
Yeah, totally.
Especially for a lot of people, they think sex is the need that I need in my relationship. But there's other needs as well, right? There's emotional connection. There's spiritual needs in a relationship. So Ashlynn, for you, what are like when you think of needs in a relationship?
It's been, like Coby said, it's kind of changed throughout this recovery process. But for me, it was a lot of like, I just need you to be honest. I just need you to be sober. I need you, my needs were very Coby based. And like his success fulfilled my needs. And as I've dived more into like actually what is going on here, and I'm seeking safety, I'm seeking that security that I can feel trust with my spouse and those types of things. It's really drilling down different than you need to do this in order for me to feel a certain way, and more about my fears and my feelings and really what I need. And here's maybe my desires that long-term I want, which are, I think, what I mentioned in the beginning, like desires where I want someone who's honest with me, but the actual need might be something like very simple. I need you to, I don't know, what's a very simple, honest.
Well, can I give you an example, Ashlynn?
Yes.
all the time I hear, like, I need you to work your recovery. I need you to go to your meetings. I need you to call your sponsor. I need you to, go to therapy. need, right?
Yeah.
But to me, when I hear that, I don't actually hear the real need.
Yeah.
Because what I actually hear from that is what I need is trust and safety if I'm going to be in a intimate relationship with someone. And so it sounds like on the periphery it's all this other stuff, but underneath it is, if that person asking their partner to do all those things tapped into their true self, what would that value be? What would that truth be that's underneath all of it? What if their partner came back and said, I don't want to go to 12 step. I don't want to listen to that weird podcast that you guys listen to. What if they came back and said that, but they also came back and said, but this is how I'm addressing my issue and my recovery, and I'm doing all these things and it's working, and and they were building safety and trust. I would guess that the partner would say, thank you, like I feel safe with you, right?
Yes.
So your needs, this is the conundrum that happens all the time. We oftentimes voice or communicate our fears. So we communicate, do this or else, like you have to. And what we don't do is open up and speak vulnerably about who we really are, which is way different than speaking our fear to try to control them to get what we want out of them.
It sounds like, Brandon, what you're saying is like my fears were probably the things that were like the loudest. Like my fears were probably like the biggest fires that were front and center. And I was most fearful of those things, but my fears didn't necessarily represent what I actually needed. And I was totally oblivious to what I internally really needed, because I was so afraid of this fire that was front and center that I thought was really my need. Right?
So if you're going to Ashlynn and you're saying, I need sex every day, give me sex every day. Yeah. Just a side note, that's like one of the biggest turnoffs ever.
Really? How?
Yeah,
I can confirm.
Ashlynn can confirm that.
Can you just hear the romance and the sensuality and
just
every day?
I bet she was just dying to just, right? Yeah, when you're guilt tripping her and forcing her, and so but think about it, Coby. If you were to dig deep and to really look at what am I really asking for? Who am I really? That's a different answer than I'm just asking for sex every day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's why do you want sex every day? What are you seeking through your partner, through Ashlynn, for?
Yeah. I mean, knowing what I know now, what I always operated against the rule of sex equals love.
Yeah.
And I wasn't connected with myself enough to realize, I could really like what actually is connection. And maybe what that actually looks like for me is, Ashlynn, I really need you to just sit next to me, and put your arms around me and rub my back, to just feel a non-sexual physical connection to you.
Because what you really needed is, or what you really need from her is what, Coby?
Connection.
I need connection. I want connection. Okay.
Can I add this real quick? Brannon, I mean, connection, Coby would say that for years. I just want connection. And then he would also say that I need sex. And for me, it was like, but I don't even know what that looks like. And so I understand how, as the betrayed, you can come and say, I just need you to be honest, and I just need you to do your recovery. And it's like, well, I don't know what the heck that means to you. Like, in my head, it means this over here. And in your head, it's something very like, maybe it's a to-do list, or maybe it's whatever. And they can be different, but you got to communicate what those look like. And so for Coby to figure out, okay, notice how specific he was. He wasn't just saying, I need connection, but it was like, and here's an example of what that looks like for me, which wasn't so scary. Like, oh, that's what you're looking for? I can actually do that. I just didn't know, because in my head, it meant this over here, something really big, and it wasn't.
as
Yeah.
backwards as that was for us to go to therapy for 18 months to the same therapist, and I would just like, I just want connection. I remember beating that drum continuously, and I legit I didn't understand, again, like I just said, I didn't understand myself enough to know what that really looked like. I didn't understand my emotions. I didn't understand I just didn't understand anything else but like sex equals love. I couldn't articulate it. I couldn't understand it. And I think that's why recovery is such a beautiful thing. I would never wish addiction on anybody, but I would wish recovery on everybody. And for this point, amongst many, but that is recovery has taught me to understand myself enough to say, I need you, Ashlynn, to be big spoon right now. Like,
But
I need you to hold me, but I also need you to just sit and listen to me and just be a cheerleader for me, or I need you to just give me your honest answer here.
okay, but I wanna say something that is kind of, it's higher level type recovery, learning and understanding. So there is a difference between connection and consumption. A big time difference between connection and consumption. And consumption is, I need you so that I feel okay. I have to have you. I have to have you be the big spoon. I have to have you touch me in a certain way. And to be honest with you guys, the love languages, I think, is level 1 of intimacy, if that. Like, here, let me tell you what I like. And then I'll do these things because you like them, but I don't really want to do them. To me, deeper levels of intimacy are not about consumption in any way. And connection is actually both people coming to the table completely authentic and completely vulnerable. Complete. Like, I don't need you to fulfill my self-worth at all. And think of the connection, think of the lovemaking that takes place when both people come to the table that way. Are you following me?
Yeah. It's just funny because Brannon, I totally remember being stuck in the love languages of like, this is what Coby is, this is what I am. I'm not good at what he wants. And it kept me stuck for a long time. So I understand what you're saying. Like, it was that level 1 for me where I tried to make it a habit for 6 months, and I'm going to do all these things to really figure out how to love him the way he wants. And now, we're both like, I think we're like all of it. Like, we need all of it. And I'm choosing to give those things to you because I love you. And it's not he only wants this and this doesn't work for him. It's like, no, actually it can all work for us, because it's what's behind it, right? The intent and love.
Absolutely. And connection is about seeing the other person and them seeing you and you actually loving them. And it sounds so simple, yet it's so complex when we turn our partners into our gods. We turn our partners into what I need you to be so that I can be okay. Eldridge actually speaks of this.
That was totally me, Brannon.
Yeah. It's most couples who struggle with sex addiction and betrayal trauma really struggle with this dynamic where the addict uses their partner so much to say, validate me, because over here I feel so disgusting and wrong. And so validate me. I need you to tell me that I'm okay, because I really don't feel like I'm okay. And when I could say to Jenny, my wife, I could say, look, I need you to validate my masculinity. I need you to give me my self-worth. I need you to do that. And the way that you do that is you need to hug me more. You need to smile at me more. You need to want me more. Like, that's what I need from you. So that, and you know what a healthy, good answer for her would be?
I love you enough to not give that to you.
I can't give that to you. I love you, and I can't give that to you. I can scratch your back. I can give you hugs, but I'm not going to scratch your back and give you hugs to validate you as a man. I can give you physical, emotional affection, but I cannot meet that need. I can't do it. And she can't, right?
Yeah.
It's
That makes
like
sense.
a hole that can never be filled.
Yeah.
Ash?
Yeah, I was just agreeing. I'm thinking back to like beginnings when I didn't feel enough and Coby couldn't give me that. There wasn't anything Coby could do, whether he was sober or telling me every day how much he loved me. I couldn't believe it and own it until I believed it for my own self, right? And so I think that's what you're saying. Either way, you have to make sure that what you're asking for isn't like, we're not taking away the self-reliance and self-soothing part of I'm okay no matter what, but these things could help. These things could feel really good and show me that you love me, that you're my partner, that you're here, that type of thing, right?
Right. It seems like there's a real dialectic that happens, which is, and if I can explain what a dialectic is, it's where two opposing things can actually coexist. And here's the dialectic. It's that I don't need you, and it's a paradox really. I don't need you, and therefore I'm very connected to you. And so I don't need to consume you, and therefore I can love you. Like we can have such a strong bond and relationship. The opposite thinking of that is, and I've seen this be very unhealthily taught, I'm not codependent, so therefore I don't need you at all. I'm good. Boom. But like I don't need connection. I don't need you. I'm independent. And that's void of connection. You can have both this really solid confidence in who you are and knowing who you are, and a real vulnerable, just tender side of you that values and loves connection with another human being. Both of those things can coexist, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. So Brannon, let me ask the question though, because what you've, as I understand it, what you have really kind of set the standard at is this is the ideal place, is that two complete people can come to the table without wanting to extract without needing to extract anything from the other for their own personal well-being. Yeah, exactly. But they can come together and they can connect and have this relationship while still maintaining their individuality.
That's it, Coby. You said that really well. Yes.
So that's let's just call that's like the ideal.
Okay.
And then, but what I want to be able to do is say, okay, so realistically, if we know where, for example, I was, where I didn't, when Ashlynn and I met, I didn't know who I was. I could tell you what I had done, but I really didn't know who I was internally. And I felt this deep need to have Ashlynn in order to complete me, the opposite of what we're actually working towards, right? And and so as addiction is on the table, and as it's known, and we're in the throes of betrayal and addiction, then what's maybe a realistic process that people can go through, Brannon, in effort to know who they are, so that then they can actually go to their partner and say, this is really what I need. Okay,
Coby. So like that is the question, and I want to get back to it. But you just kind of talked about something I want to just point out. Cool. You take somebody who feels like, I'm really not enough. I'm not okay. I'm broken, and I just need somebody to love me. Please love me. Please see that I'm okay and that I'm enough. Okay. You take somebody on that end of the spectrum, and then they get in a relationship with somebody who feels like, you know what, I'm enough when I can fix someone else's problems. I'm enough when I can like be important, when I can, right? You mix those two things together and it creates this dynamic of consumption in a relationship where each other's needs are not being met. Rather, the relationship becomes this thing that that soothes the shame, but keeps the shame very much alive, right?
Wow.
And not intentionally, Brannon. Like sometimes you hear that what you just said, and it's like, no, I am not the person who is like, I didn't get married to an unhealthy person because I'm unhealthy. It's hard to hear, but like we all have our own roles, right?
Right. Yes. And I like how you say that, Ashlyn, not intentionally. You automatically fall into these roles. That fear and that shame is driving the attachment. So you automatically do it because it feels like it's the healthy, right thing to do. But if you look at that dynamic, it comes back to Coby's question. How do you break free from a relationship that's feeding that shame and that unhealthy attachment is you stop and you have to get humble enough to do some very strong self-reflection. Why am I a caretaker? Why am I a consumer? Why do I rely on my partner in order to feel good enough about myself? Why can't I be totally honest and authentic in my relationships? It's not because they get mad. It's I can't get honest and authentic. Why? So for you to dig into that and say, okay, where is my shame? What is my fear? And how am I acting on that shame and that fear in my relationship? And I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on an example would be when they're really struggling, I love to step in and fix it and give advice. Maybe I need to shut up and let them figure out how to deal with their stuff. Right. Or when I'm really uncomfortable, I go to my spouse because I want her to tell me I'm okay. Well, you know what? Maybe I need to figure out how to be okay between God and I first. And then I'll go to my spouse and connect. Right.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Ash,
yes. And it's just funny because you hear it now. It's like, yeah, of course. But in the beginning, it's like, what? How do I do that? Tell me how to do that, Brannon. So we might have some of those people listening going, tell me more. It's interesting because I remember a specific conversation with you, Brannon, when we were meeting in person. Coby and I drive 30 minutes to come and record the podcast, and we're on time 0% of the time. And so I remember coming, and at one point we drove separately because I'm like, I'm not going to be late. And you had that conversation with me like, Ashlynn, but what are you really feeling? What are the narratives going on behind Coby makes you late? What is, and it was just so interesting to have you push on such a silly issue, right? It wasn't recovery work. It wasn't like hard, but there was a lot of resentment because I was late all the time. And I was like, I don't want Brannon to think I'm this jerk or whatever. And it through that self-reflection that you forced me to do, it was like, oh, this is way more about me and what I was worried and my fears. And here's what I need. And we came to some really simple conclusions. We're not on time still, hardly ever. But I've let a lot of that go because we've had those really hard conversations to say, okay, if we're not going to be even close on time, Cobe, I need a heads up. Like let's at least make a plan.
That's a really good example. And I just want to illustrate to the audience what you're saying, because you came in like, hey, I try to be on time, and it was all about Coby. And then the feedback you got from me was like, hey, Ashlynn, look within, like what's going on with you. And in that moment though, like the lateness or whatever, it seems so obvious that it's just all about Coby. Like, right?
I remember thinking like, but Brannon, like, it's not that big of an issue. Like, why are we digging in and like finding, like, no, but yet it was this reoccurring argument, reoccurring resentment that we both had against each other. So like, duh, why would we not dig deeper and say, why does it bother me? What's going on?
Right. Yeah.
So thank you for that.
And that wasn't just for recording the podcast. That was like going to church. That was like,
it was everything.
Yeah, it was all the things actually. So poor Ashlynn.
It wasn't a big deal, apparently. No, it was.
But here's what's really interesting about this is that this really is critical like phase. I'm just kind of looking at this like spitballing, Brannon, so correct me if I'm wrong on this, but this is really critical phase 2 recovery, because phase 1 we're just trying to get out of the fog of active addiction and the fog
Yes.
active betrayal trauma, which are just the symptoms of really core issues of not knowing ourselves. And so that's why this was like Greek to me.
That's
and
a great point.
In some aspects, it really still is. Ashlyn's always up my tailpipe about, Coby, like, what are you going to do? What are your hobbies? What are you going to do?
Yeah, that's a great point, Coby.
So
at the very beginning of it all, you know, when you're coming out of the addiction, your identity is I'm disgusting, I'm broken, I'm not okay. And so then all of a sudden you're being asked to show up authentic and real and really reflective and knowing who you are. There's a process to get there. And that process is consistency with showing up honestly. So that you do that over and over again, you realize I'm okay as I am. So that's a really good point, Coby, is right at the get-go. If you're listening to this first thing, don't expect yourself to totally show up humble, self-reflective, and totally honest in your relationship. I have a question for you guys. So
Okay.
let's say I dig down to the deep depths of my soul, and I realize that I need to drive a red car. Okay. And my wife digs down to the deep depths of her soul, and she's humble and self-reflective and honest. And she says, I can't be married to a man who drives a red car. Like, I can't be married to a guy who drives a red car. And I say, well, I have to drive a red car. Like, if I'm honest with you, like, if I gotta be totally honest with you, I gotta drive a red car. And she says, well, I can't be married to a guy who drives a red car. Now what?
It sounds like there's some really great work ahead. It's like, I think it's a healthy thing to say, to explore how well, and this is just my knee jerk, right? But I think it's a really healthy thing to say, okay, so what does this mean for us moving forward? Is this actually is this need a deal breaker if it's not met? Is it not a deal breaker, but something I want to just spend some time just sitting in, even though I've come to that truth? I don't know. I don't think that that's necessarily grounds for just saying, okay, we're going to cut ties and go our separate ways because of the red car. But I think it's a really important conversation to just sit in and understand what it's really about.
I think you're pretty spot on. Ashlynn, do you have any thoughts on it?
No, I don't. I do have a short process, but for me, yes, I would be like, okay, say more. I want to hear what the feelings are behind that and the narratives and what needs these are fulfilling, because that's how I figure out what my core needs are, is like a process of really sitting in that and being reflective and not just like, but this feels right, so this is probably the answer.
Yeah. So I love what both of you are saying, because this friction that happens, if you can take that friction and you cannot make it me against them, if you make it not a power struggle, but you take that friction and you really start to use that friction to discover who you really are, then it's a good thing. It's progressing you forward. It might end up destroying the relationship. That could happen. The example I give all the time is like, if my wife were spitting tobacco all over our house, you know, and she was like, I have to do this, I have to do this, I could really search within, what's my truth, you know, and how can I still love her and have compassion, and we might have to go our separate ways. But that friction helps you clarify who you are.
It vets the truths and the needs and so forth, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. But here's the problem, is a lot of times people will sell out because of fear of rejection or abandonment. So they'll say, yeah, I'm okay with driving a green car. Yeah, I'm fine with it. But deep down, they're not. But they're so scared that their partner won't be okay that they have to drive a red car, that they back off. And that's where they betray themselves. They sacrifice themselves. You see this with addiction all the time. oh, you've cheated on me or acted out or hurt me again and again and again. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. Deep down, I'm not okay with it. But the fear of losing the relationship is so high that I'll just kind of hide my head under the sand a little bit, right?
Wow.
So
wow. Yeah. I mean, that's like layers and layers of issues of identity, of not just betrayal, but also like it's a betrayal, sounds like, based upon an unknown but selfish need, an unhealthy need, which is like, I'm going to betray myself, but not really consciously realizing that my greater fear is being alone.
Right. Yes. So therefore, I'll give up my self-respect and my truths.
Yes. And again, that right there, what you're saying to me, Brannon, it totally tells me why this is like really knowing how to get what you want, knowing how to ask what you want, really demands that you work through like the first phase of recovery, so that active addiction and active betrayal and those things are kind of are in a good place. They're not entirely 100% squared away, but they're really in a good place, so that allows you space, you and your partner space, to really deal with these kind of core issues. And what you just described to me is like layers and layers and layers of really really important but really tough stuff.
Right. And you know what's interesting, Coby, is if you're healthy and you know, you're kind of beyond that first just level of getting your bearings, something that seems seemingly small, like being late, like Ashlynn you're talking about, can lead to some real depth when it comes to self-discovery. It's like I'm late. Oh, then you realize, oh, I hate being late because I hate the way people look at me, and I hate and then all of a sudden you're like really looking at all the stuff that it's triggering. You know, my wife does little things, and to me they're big things. And why are they big things? Well, I need to look at that and figure that out and know who I am and see where my truths lie and trust myself. You know, so.
Well, it's interesting, Brannon, because like I said, that little thing of being on time or being late all the time, it was this I mean, we were having it multiple times a week, you know, at least twice a week, church and work, where I was frustrated. I was, you know, I was blaming all these resentments, right? And yet when you had challenged me to do that, it was a lot of that self-reflection of like, oh, so now we can come up with things that will work, where we can compromise, where
Right.
I can see like myself and own my own stuff. And for Coby, he stepped into that as well, and he owned some of his own stuff. But it's such a different way to approach a seemingly small problem, but reoccurring,
Right.
to really just dig. And it sounds tricky, but it really, for me, for me is just pen to paper. I'm again writing what my feelings are around this situation. What are my fear narratives, which can be crazy. Like I built some crazy mountains, right? And then, okay, well, what are my needs with that? And I'll go as far as even desires. Like ideally, I would like this, and this, and they may never happen. But for now, my needs we can compromise and figure out needs for both parties.
Right. But look at the self-reflection that you're doing. It's awesome. So dig deep, you guys, figure out who you are. And you know what? Meet your own needs first before you go to your partner and say, please fill my bucket and meet all my needs. And that's what will lead to connection.
You know, what's really interesting, just considering how to really like it, for those people who are listening who really are in kind of like this first phase, as we call it. We just kind of dubbed it that just for the sake of conversation in this episode. But for the people who are in the first phase, or kind of a phase one of recovery, where they're just trying to get out of the front and center issues, as I call it, the fog of active addiction and shame, and the fog of active betrayal trauma and the shame that comes with that too. Being able to, and this is why I love this, it's like sometimes it's really hard in those phases to know exactly what we need. because we're still maybe we haven't even figured out who we are. But this kind of, my thought goes back to this, is when we worked on the me before the we, I think what's really important in understanding what I actually need in phase 1 of recovery is to say, if I can go through my dailies and I can make sure that I execute, that I throw my best effort into the things that I can control, which are only from within, the things that I can do, then if I go through that process and I evaluate, okay, I've done all my dailies today, I've connected with myself by working out, by journaling, I've connected with my higher power by doing my spiritual devotional, and I've connected with my partner by doing like this emotional check-in with the feeling wheel. That can that not in and of itself be a process of saying, okay, now that I've done those things, what is it that I really need right now in the early stage, in the first phase of recovery? Is that not a process that someone can go through, really, Brannon, to vet their needs?
Well, I think it does two things. I think it helps them really self-reflect and get to know who they are when they're consistent with their dailies.
Yeah.
But there's this other benefit that it really drives home them having confidence in themselves and trusting themselves. And so the combination of those two things, trusting themselves, having confidence in themselves.
The indulgent or the addict can really trust themselves and have confidence in themselves when they say,
and same with the betrayed. I mean, yes, absolutely. And that's where it really gets good, because that's when you now aren't so afraid of rejection and abandonment, and you don't need to consume your partner. So you can show up more authentic in your relationships.
Wow.
Yes. I love it. A simple reminder I've been saying a lot lately, whether it's to my kids or to myself, is just, if I don't know my own needs, how can I expect to get my needs met? So you've got to sit with yourself and figure out what you need. And like Coby was saying, making sure that you're filling your own bucket and not seeking someone else to fill it up for you in those needs. So,
and when it comes to your needs, don't shit on yourself.
yeah.
I mean, they are what they are. It's okay. You are who you are.
Yes.
Yes. All right.
Wow. What a great, like, this is for me, this has been like a really great thought-provoking episode for, again, this episode exactly is the reason why I'm like, I wish so badly that Ashlynn, you and I could have had this when we first started. Oh my gosh, this resource. And anyway, so if you've heard this and something's been meaningful for you, it struck you, the way that you can help move this cause forward is by number one, sharing this with someone that it might help. But also too, it's like, if you can't do that, then leave a review and rate the podcast. That's a way to give street cred to the podcast so that other people can find it and have the help that they need. I just wish so bad that we would have had this, because I think there's been some really great insights just on this. And that's not like in the self-aggrandizing way, but that's just to say there's been some really good thought processes that I've shared today. So.
For sure. And if you are in that phase 1, we do have, like, the next step, some helpful tips for you. So we have that free resource for you at beyond-enough.com/step1, and it's the number 1. That's just another, like, I don't know what to do next. I'm listening to this wishing I had a little bit more. Here you go. So go there, and we'll put that link in the show notes as well. So thank you guys for being here, and thank you guys for recording today.
Thanks,
See you guys.
See ya.